Lou Bassinis is back with us, the Public Ventures President, Chief Market Strategist, Michelle Schneider, as well, the MarketGauge.com Chief Strategist. Michelle, these are all aberrant events, and we hope brief events when you get something like this. But I'm wondering the economic impact of this, especially if it drags, if it drags on and then goes to other areas of the country as it's likely to.
Well, Neil, first of all, I live in New Mexico, so it's the land of enchantment and the land of fires. And so we're pretty well used to the impact and what it can have on the economy locally because things have to shut down. So that's, unfortunate, in our heart here in New Mexico, where we've had actually great rain, goes out to the people on the East Coast. But as far as the economic impact, to me, if we step back, it really just is another thorn in the side of how vulnerable people have felt for years now, starting with COVID, and how this can impact supply chain, inflation, and all of these reminders are going to be very, very prevalent in people's minds as far as going forward and being reluctant to go out there. And all of these have not only an impact on everything we just mentioned in terms of supply and supply chain, but even, rising crime. So it's just another reason for people to be fearful, and it's unfortunate because it will pass eventually, but it obviously has destruction along the way.
Yeah, quite a bit of it too. Lou, I was mentioning some of these companies that are telling their workers, if you feel uncomfortable going in, don't go in. But some of them, the exact same companies, in the case of Google, increasingly saying, we really think it's a good idea if you do come in. And you're hearing it from a lot of companies like Salesforce, even Martha Stewart weighing in. She might love being at home and cooking and doing all of that stuff, but when it comes to getting the job done, show up at work. What do you make of all of this and the impact?
Yeah, I mean, look, what about the great generation that used to walk uphill to school every day in the snow both ways, right? Now there's fires and we're not going to go to work. This is one of those policies that makes you go, because Google is trying to get people back into the office. And I would tell you the commercial real estate market and what's going on, the dynamics there necessitate everyone returning to work because we need the occupancy rate. So I was actually talking with a Google friend and worker last night, and he was making the point that because of COVID, a lot of the office spaces for Google upgraded their HVAC filtration system. So it's probably safer to be in the office than at home. So that's a unique dynamic, but I just worry about the knock-on effects. What happens when we get to the middle of the summer and the heat index is over 105 or 110? Are people going to expect to be able to stay home then? What if there's other inclement weather? It's a slippery slope as we try and get people to move back to normalcy and back into office space, which is a necessity in the big cities, as we're seeing the commercial real estate market crumble in San Francisco, in New York, here as well. So I think there's more to come here. Not a policy that I'd be supportive of right now.
If you think about it, Michelle, I think we're in Manhattan, we're about half of those who have returned to work right now. In other words, half the capacity we were looking at in a lot of these office buildings than what we had again prior to COVID. And it's been stuck at that level, roughly. I hear it's similar in a lot of other U.S. cities. So let's say it stays there, doesn't move much, despite some of the push by employers to do, what Lou was saying and kind of entice people back. Then what? I mean, then you do have to wonder about commercial property. You do have to wonder about those exposed to that on their balance sheets and the spillover. What do you see happening?
Well, definitely that's an impact. I mean, we've already seen commercial space being impacted with online and e-commerce in terms of malls, and all of the areas that have dealt with brick and mortar have declined sharply over the last few years. So add this to the mix now with COVID. So it's really going to be, yes, some impact economically, of course, in the commercial real estate market. But, obviously we have to innovate as well. And a lot of the spaces that I talked about in terms of commercial have repurposed. And maybe that's what's going to happen too. But it'll be very interesting. And to Lou's point, yes, I mean, really, if you look at the whole job market right now, we can see all of this reflected with labor participation going up. Even though jobless claims were higher today, the labor market itself is so complex, and certainly this is not going to help.
If I could get your guys' final thoughts on the big Fed meeting next week, The thinking used to be a little more than a few weeks ago that this was the one they paused at, and they just sort of got to lay of the land what was going to happen. Now, with some of the strong economic news we've gotten out, the claims report today notwithstanding, the lowest in a couple of years, or the highest, I should say, that maybe not. But Lou, to you, what do you think happens next week and what the signal from the Fed will be?
Yeah, I'm not going to deviate. I've been a contrarian on this. I think the Fed has definitely got another 25 basis point hike in store, whether it's this month or next month. I think inflation is proving really sticky. Yes, it's peaked, it's coming down, but it's really sticking. You look at the core PCE, last reading was a little hotter than we wanted. So, we get CPI next week. That might give the Fed the reason to just see where CPI comes in before they hike again. But I think June or July, we're definitely getting a hike, which is funny because 3 weeks ago, like you mentioned, the markets were expecting a cut in July, which just seems insane. So I think we got another hike or two ahead of us before they pause.
All right. Michelle, you're quoting some very popular, not popular if you don't like inflation, but inflation measurements, which are holding pretty stubborn right now. It's not as if it's disappearing. It's still a factor. In fact, it's again hiccuping. What do you see happening and the Fed doing?
Well, I actually think they may pause but then hike later on because they've already proven to be extremely reactive and not proactive. And it would probably behoove them to pause right here because they can kind of take a victory lap saying, we've averted recession. But getting back to inflation, I'm definitely in the camp of much higher inflation is coming for a myriad of reasons. And this fire is just a small example of how Mother Nature has been the X factor through all of this, on top of striking and wage requirements and still, Russia threatening Black Sea. All of this stuff comes to me, in my mind, as a reason why inflation go up. And the Fed is so data driven right now. If CPI isn't too horrible, and their policy's probably already set, I go for pause. But yeah, I think they'll have to play catch up later on.
Guys, thank you both very, very much. As they were wrapping up here.